Hi, everybody. This is Linda Abraham. We're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes. And before we start, I know Cyd Foote has prepared a fantastic presentation for you. I want you to be wide awake and ready to both absorb, engage the material that she's prepared for you. So we're going to have a moment of motion starting now. Please get off your couch or desk or whatever, chair, whatever, and move. You can jog in place, march in place, do jumping jacks, push-ups, dance, whatever you want. You have about 55 seconds left, but move, jump up and down. If you happen to be in an open office, and nobody's in an open office today, then you can wiggle your feet, but keep moving. And when you finish the moment of motion, I'd also like to ask that you share news of this webinar with your friends. They can still join us. We've had a really good response to this webinar, but we also have a fairly large license. So I'm going to chat you the registration page, and you keep moving, and you can share it with your friends, with your family, with anybody that you know who is applying to medical school. So you have about, it's getting close, about 5 seconds left. Keep moving, keep moving. Okay, you can take a break now. For those of you who just joined us, we're going to be starting the webinar in a moment. And again, if you have friends who are applying to medical school, they're going to want to know about the interview tips that Cydney Foote's going to provide during this webinar. So here again is a registration page. Hello, my name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president and founder of Accepted It and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to How to Nail Your Med School Interviews, to be presented by Cydney Foote. Before we start, I'd like to bring a few items to your attention. First, Cydney may ask questions during the presentation, ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. And as tremendous Zoom veterans that we all are, I feel a little bit when I make that announcement like the people telling you how to fasten your seatbelt on an airplane. But in any case, that's how you can raise your hand. If you're here because you want to ace your interviews, your med school interviews, attend medical school, and pursue the career of your dreams, please raise your hand. And that means clicking on that hand icon. Okay, great. Most of you are here for the right reasons and know how to use Zoom. Wonderful. Now, raising hands allows you to respond to our questions. What about your questions? We have a lot of time at the end of Cydney's presentation for questions, and we'll answer them then. You can pose questions at any time, however, in the question window. Cyd may also ask open-ended questions during the presentation, Cyd or I. And if we do ask that kind of a question, we ask that you respond in the chat window. And the reason for that is very simple. I can get through a lot more questions if I know where to look for them. So the webinar, somebody's asking right now, how long will this webinar be? It's probably going to be right around an hour. So I hope you can join us for the whole thing. Again, Cyd has prepared some very valuable material. Now, when you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback. I review all the survey responses. So again, you're not going to be wasting your time by doing so. And we're also going to have some polls, and we're going to start with one right now. Here you go. How many of you are applying this cycle, 2020, 2021, next cycle, 2021, 2022, or later? Okay. How many of you are applying this cycle, next cycle, or later? And let's close the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 83% having voted, so that's a tremendous percentage. 84% are this cycle. 9% are next cycle, and 7% are later. All right. That's actually, I'm surprised at how many are planning ahead, but whether you're planning to apply this cycle or later, all are welcome, that's for sure. Here are the results for your viewing. And then the other question I have for you, and I'm going to stop sharing this poll, is have any of you already received interview invitations? Okay. Have any of you already received interview invitations? The options are yes and no. And again, 86% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the polling. Actually, it's 87% now. 18% have already received an interview invitation. Congratulations. And 82% not yet. I should have made that not yet as opposed to no. And here again are the results for you to see. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce Cydney Foote. Let's close this. Who will present how to nail your med school interviews today. Prior to joining Accepted, Cydney worked as an administrator at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She's also the author of the ebooks, Write Your Way to Medical School, and 2 other ebooks. Using her healthcare experience, eagle editing eye, and storytelling skills, Cyd has been helping Accepted's clients gain acceptance to demanding medical schools and residency programs since 2001. She is particularly skilled at interview prep and will share her secrets with you during this webinar. And now, Cydney Foote will present how to nail your med school interviews.
Thanks, Linda, and welcome to everybody who's joined us here tonight. I wonder how everybody's holding up. I know this is already a really stressful process, and this year even more so. So I'm really hoping that tonight we can talk about some ways to at least make your interviews a little less stressful and help you present yourself as somebody who's committed to enter the medical profession in this really challenging time. I'm going to be covering a lot tonight, and I'll probably talk quite fast, so I apologize for that in advance, but there will be time to ask questions at the end. And like Linda said, you can post your questions at any time so you don't forget. You're also welcome to send me questions after the webinar ends if you want to just email those to me as well. I always like to start my interview webinar with a short clip from ER that shows doctors who've been roped into doing med school interviews. Let's take a look at this simpler time of in-person interviews.
Is it playing, Cyd?
Yes, is it not playing for you?
I don't hear it. Raise your hand if you hear it, or if it's playing for you. I don't think it's playing for everybody else.
Oh no, it's.
Nope, nobody raised their hands. So,
Really?
yeah, and actually in the chat window, it says the video is not playing. It's not playing.
What?
Nope. Yeah, so.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. Let's skip out of that. Basically, what it is just an interview showing a lot of medical students talking to the admissions committee and basically all saying that they want to help people and that they are committed to the science and the humanity of medicine. The point is that it just gets a little repetitive if that is what they are hearing from everybody. So it's not, the point I want to make with this, and apologies for the tech problems, but the issue is not that they're saying anything wrong, because you want to help people. That's what doctors do. And you want to unite science and humanism. That's what doctors do every day. But you want to stand out. And if you're saying what everyone else is, then you're not going to do that. So what I'm trying to do is, through this interview, is try to help you make your story stand out and be remembered after all that about helping people is gone. So to do this tonight, we're going to start with the basics. What you can do in advance, what the interview day is going to be like, especially this year with all the virtual interviews, how you can construct your story and the content of what you're trying to tell and how you're presenting yourself. And finally, we'll talk about some practice methods. So in terms of planning ahead, I like to start with what to wear. In a virtual interview, your dress should be really just as it would in a face-to-face interview. pants and shoes. This will help you appear more professional and engage with the interviewer. It's also going to help you get in the right mindset for the interview. And if you're feeling more prepared and confident, you're going to come across that way. The reverse is also true. So a quick caveat to what I'll say here. I know a lot of people are probably not in situations right now where they have a lot of extra money to spend on interview wear. And I also know that a lot of people don't really have access to places where they would normally go to buy suits. So the suggestions I'm giving tonight are the ideal, but please adjust them to their circumstances. I do think medical school admissions committees are going to try to be more accepting of things like that this year. But you still want to try to, show yourself in the best way possible. A perfect outfit's not going to get you a seat in a medical school class, but a bad one can be distracting. So just keep that in mind. First, we'll talk about what men should wear. You can't go wrong with a conservative suit. It doesn't have to be black, but darker colors like charcoal or navy or pinstripe are all okay. Make sure you pair it with a tasteful dress shirt, usually white or maybe a pale blue, and a nice tie in a contrasting color. If it's been a while since you've tried on your suit jacket, you need to do that in advance. Make sure that everything still fits. The shoulders are hitting the right spot, the sleeves aren't too long. You may need to get it altered. You may even be able to get someone to help you pin it in the back if it's just a little loose, if you can't go out to get alterations. But in any case, you want to make sure that you look presentable and professional on the screen. I'm not concerned with the color of your belt and shoes this year, but try to look mature and professional. And like I said, wear pants. They don't necessarily need to be the suit pants, but if you're in the proper mindset for a professional interview, it will help you present yourself better. Women have a little more leeway fashion-wise, but they should still err on the side of conservatism. Dark blue or black or charcoal gray pantsuits are popular, usually with a solid color shirt underneath. You can also add a little bit of color if you have like a sage suit or Merlot, but try to keep it conservative and nothing too flashy. There's a regional preference to this. East Coast schools tend to be more traditional than those in the West, where you might wear a pattern top or instead of like a white button-up shirt. But it really depends on the way that you feel comfortable. If you want to go traditional and everything, or if you want to be a little bit brighter, that's fine. Just make sure that you feel comfortable and that you feel you're presenting yourself professionally. In virtual interviews, your face or head is going to be in the spotlight. And I know this presents extra challenges, especially to applicants living in where, the hairdressers aren't accessible. I've been cutting my own hair for a while now, and it's probably not what I want to show to interviewers. But I do think that, again, that interviewers are going to try to be accepting of this. Subconscious bias can still come through, though, so do what you can to minimize that. Longer hair can still be clean and neatly groomed, pulled back, as can facial hair. You want to look trimmed and tidy. And this is true for online interviews more than in-person interviews, but hairspray is your friend. You can use it liberally to keep your hair out of your face, and no one will be the wiser. Pay attention to your hands and nails as well. You probably aren't going to show your hands on camera, but just in case, make sure that that they're neat and tidy. Makeup looks a lot different on camera than it does in person, and much of your look will also depend on the lighting, which we'll talk about later. But remember that overall, less is more. Aim for a subtle look, avoiding bright lipstick or heavy blush and eyeshadow. Makeup for on-camera looks can be a full presentation in itself, and it's definitely not my field of expertise. However, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube that can help you present the professional you, and I definitely advise you to seek those out. So now let's jump ahead to the days, maybe the weeks before the interview. There's a couple of things that you can do to keep yourself calmer on the interview day. I am a big advocate of over-planning, so your mileage may vary, but my suggestions for making the day go easier start in the days before. First thing you want to do is frame your view. In virtual interviews, you have control, so take advantage of that. You'll start with the basic tech tools, a camera, a microphone. For the highest quality presentation, an external webcam and a microphone are ideal, but if these aren't available, then the camera on your laptop and your earbuds with a microphone are okay. In the week before your virtual interview, check these to make sure that they're working and that you're able to use them effectively. Test out the audio levels so they're not too soft or too loud, and make sure that you appear the way that you want to on camera. You'll also need a reliable internet connection. If you're able to connect via Ethernet, that will help you avoid a lot of the problems that you might have with Wi-Fi. If you have to use Wi-Fi and are sharing your bandwidth with others, ask them if they can stay offline for the duration of your interview, or prioritize bandwidth to your device if you can do that through your internet system. Finally, familiarize yourself with the streaming service, Zoom or whichever they use, so that you'll know how to adjust your audio and deal with any video issues and won't try to play a YouTube video that doesn't work. You're going to be nervous enough for the interview, so try not to add to that with technical issues. Next, you want to select your background. Where do you want to do the interview? Somewhere quiet and with a clean background is very important. Having a bed in the background or a kitchen or any clutter is going to give a poor impression. So will swiveling and a swivel chair. So sit in a stationary chair that gives you the best posture. As far as the backdrop, something simple and plain is best. A whiteboard can work, a simple mesh screen. You'll see that I have a white window shade later that I use as my background. Whatever it is, keep it simple so the focus will stay on you. And it's a good idea to go to whatever video program you're using to test in advance, again, to make sure you know what it'll look like. Excuse me. Keep your webcam and your camera a little bit above eye level. I arranged several boxes as a base for my laptop to get the proper height. And this is the tricky part, but you want to maintain eye contact with the camera. We have a tendency to have our eyes drift downwards or look at whoever is speaking on the screen. So practice keeping your focus on the camera eye. To help you minimize the drift of your eyes, you can position the interviewer's pane near the webcam. Excuse me for this. Audio is as important as video in choosing your background. Any noises, like a dog barking or a window that's open next to a busy highway, can distract from your performance. Obviously, you can't control all the sounds, but do what you can. This means giving everybody in your household a heads up that you've got an interview and ask them to be quiet, not to walk through your screen, and not to have any pets around while you're doing the interview. Lighting is another important aspect that will affect how you present yourself. You could spend a fortune on lighting equipment, but just a few task lamps placed on the opposite side of your camera will do the trick. They shouldn't be shining bright at you, but have them adjusted above you so they'll brighten the environment. And if you have natural lighting, that's best of all. Sitting beside or in front of a window with indirect light, not shining directly on you, is your best bet. Whatever you're using, be sure to position your seating so you're not backlit, or this will wash out your face and show you as a shadow. Alongside your appearance, your voice is key in a virtual interview. Your tone of voice says the most about your interest and your enthusiasm, and the best way to deal with problems is awareness and practice. So I want you to record yourself. See how you talk. Do you sound like this when you're trying to remember what you want to say? Are the words just spilling out without any variation? A lot of people do flatten their voices into a monotone when they get nervous. Your breath and posture both affect this. So try to be aware of how you're sitting and breathing. And practice using your voice to highlight what you're saying through pauses, which can add impact, or by raising or lowering the tone of your voice. If you'll do this in your practice sessions beforehand, you'll become a lot more aware of your tone and be able to sound more engaged during the interview. Other people start to talk really fast and their voices can rise and shake as they get nervous. Women tend to do this more, and not coincidentally, this nervous trait comes across as a lack of credibility. The best way to deal with this, again, is through practice. Slow down and get control of your breathing. If you have several people in the interview on your screen, try focusing on one of them as you intentionally slow down your speech and inhale. The pitch of your voice should lower as you continue. Women also need to be especially conscious of upspeak, which is that raising your voice at the end of your sentence, and also of glottal fry, that creaky tone that the Kardashians have. I keep harping on breath, but one of the best ways to avoid these issues is to have enough breath to support your words. These speech patterns undermine your credibility. And again, this is especially true when the speaker is female. They come across as less educated and less trustworthy. And this is definitely not the impression that you want to convey. In addressing your specific vocal concerns, I urge you again to visit YouTube. There are so many wonderful videos there about different speech issues and how to make adjustments. I'm sure you can find something to help you. Now, At least the night before the interview, you want to get your suit ready. You should already have tried it on to make sure it fits well, but that night before, make sure it's pressed, that there's no cat hair on it, that there's no stains, that a button's not about to fall off. Anything you can do to make the next day easier. Instead of sitting around that night getting nervous, get on your phone or your laptop and do some snooping about the school. It might be that you find some new research that interests you. Recently, I Googled the University of Wisconsin in my town, and I discovered that a researcher there is finding ways to replicate toxoparasites in mice so they no longer have to use cats to research toxoplasmosis. This is an interesting find that it's very recent. It shows that you're interested in the school, and you might want to talk about it or ask some questions. It's also good to be prepared so you don't put your foot in your mouth. If you're interviewing at certain schools, like USC, for instance, it's good to know to steer away from some of their scandals. Depending on your personal preferences at this point, practicing more can be good or bad. You don't want to make yourself more nervous. But if you prepare like I'll suggest below, you'll already know your stories and you'll be able to use them in response to different questions. What can be more constructive at this point is making sure you know which stories you want to answer which questions. So for instance, you could know that if you're asked about leadership, you want to talk about your experience on the rowing team or about with student government. If you're asked about integrity, you want to talk about research or student government. If you're asked about cultural competency, you might have an example from volunteering at the hospice or a student group. And here's where web interviews have a real advantage. If you have a few key points that you want to remember, write them on sticky notes and place them around your webcam. I'm talking about broad strokes here, not fine details. You do not want to be reading the screen. And you don't want your gaze to be drifting up and down, so don't overclutter your screen with them and don't place them too far below your eye level. Even if you do rely on a few sticky notes, the key to a really comfortable, stress-free interview is being familiar with your stories. And you won't get around that with your notes. We'll talk about this in depth in the next section. Finally, the night before, take care of yourself. Have a nice healthy meal, take a walk outside if you can, do yoga or exercise, and go to bed at a reasonable time. I apologize for sounding like a mom here, but this is a stressful time and you just can't perform best if you're worn out. So it's interview day. Before you start, minimize your distractions. Remind anyone in the house that you need privacy and pets. Privacy and quiet. If you have pets, well, we love them, but put them away where they won't disturb you. Turn off your phone, turn off any notifications on your computer, and close every other program. In the half hour before your interview, check your internet connection and sign on to the video or phone meeting that the school's provided. Turn on your sound and video and ensure everything is working. Get anything you might need during the interview. I recommend having a glass of water or apple juice handy. The reason I say apple juice is that if you have a cough, it's going to more quickly ease your throat and stop your coughing. Hopefully you won't need to drink from it, but it's good to have. Also, have a notepad and pen within reach so you can jot down anything that you might need to ask about later without having to look for it. Finally, in the minutes before the interview, some people find it helps to take a brisk walk to burn off their nervous energy. Others might want to do some stretches or breathing exercises like Linda was having you do at the beginning. This is all a good way to get in the mindset of the interview that's coming next. Now, we already talked about your tone of voice above and how the way you say something can impact what people hear. Hopefully by the time you get to the interview, you already know what you sound like. But right before the interview, take advantage of some vocal warm-ups. Professional actors and narrators have developed a wealth of speech exercises to prepare themselves before performances. And many are shared on YouTube again. Just search for vocal exercises for video interviews and you'll get a ton of great warm-ups. They'll loosen up your tongue and get you ready to present yourself. No matter how centered you are, that moment when the interview begins can bring out your anxieties. Being mindful of what you're doing can present you at the best. Take just a second to compose yourself. Hold your head up high, smile. Make sure your posture is strong. Slouching is a nonverbal sign of insecurity and indifference, and it also puts pressure on your lungs and neck and makes it harder for you to speak confidently. So sit up straight, look straight into the camera, and start the interview with as much confidence as you can muster. We're going to talk about the content of your interview next, but before we do, I want to fast forward to after the interview. when you'll probably just want to take off your suit and relax. Instead, I want you to take a moment, and while the experience is fresh in your mind, record as much as you can remember. Try to scribble down any questions, and if there were any that was stumped you, be sure to star them. I remember one client who was so sure she'd loved an answer that in her thank you note, she explained that she'd been reflecting on this question afterwards and wished that she'd said this. And she was subsequently accepted at that school. Even if you don't decide to take such a bold step, knowing which answers you need to work on will help you prepare for your next interview. And knowing which stories are interesting to the interviewer can help you figure out what you might want to retell later. Now, I mentioned thank you notes, and right after the interview is a great time to take care of them. You don't want them to be long, just a few lines referencing something that you discuss with the interviewers, and that will help them jog their memories. Write everything while it's fresh in your mind and upload them to the school's online portal, and you can check that item off your list. Finally, treat yourself, no matter how the interview went. You survived, and you need to reward yourself. A nice takeout order, a long bath, whatever will help you feel like you've accomplished this step in the application process. This will help give you some feeling of closure on the interview and get you ready to leave that decision in someone else's hands and move to the next one. Now, normally I do stop here for questions, but we're going to have a longer Q&A at the end. So if you could just keep writing down whatever you have that you'd like to ask, I will come back to anything you have questions about. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the physical things that can help you prepare and perform well on the day. And I know you're probably thinking, how am I supposed to remember all of that and what I'm supposed to say? Like I mentioned before, the key is familiarity with your stories. If you're already comfortable with what you want to talk about, it will free up enough real estate in your brain so that you can be conscious of your physical cues. So, how do you do that? Well, you can start by writing out perfect answers to every single question and then reading them over and over until you recite them. This is a great approach if you're an accomplished actor on the level of Meryl Streep. But if you're not comfortable delivering scripts and delivering them verbatim, then I recommend another approach. What I help my clients do, and what I hope I can help you do, is prepare efficiently and get comfortable enough with your stories so that you can share them in a positive and engaging way. Obviously, I can't give you answers to the questions you'll be asked. Those will be coming from you, but I can give you a method for addressing them, which should help you answer both the questions you expect and those you never saw coming. To do that, I begin with a few key questions of my own. First of all, how do you want the interviewer to think of you? When you finish, what are the key impressions that you want to leave them with? What can you tell them that will reinforce your strengths and address and minimize your weaknesses? And how can you show them that you know a great deal about the school, that you're well prepared for this interview? And just as importantly, how can you learn whatever you need to know to decide which school to attend? Preparing the answers to these questions takes place long before the interview. In fact, you can start tonight, and the earlier the better. In answering these questions, you will set goals for the interview and give yourself a clear idea of what impression you want to leave beyond this desire to help people. So let's break it down a bit. I'd like you to share how you might want an interviewer to think of you. Could you take just a moment and type that in the box, please?
Let's see.
I'm not looking for things like I'm really committed to medicine or vague ideas like I've had valuable experiences that will make me a good doctor. Try to be specific about what exactly you want the interviewer to remember about you.
Okay, so here we're getting a lot of responses.
Great.
I'm resilient. Can you see the chat window, Sid? No. Okay, so I'll just read it. Different,
please.
diverse, bring something new to the class. From Elaine, I'm genuine. From Christy, determined and dedicated. From Ishan, I want to make sure that I have a strong work ethic and I have a clear, wait a minute, this moved. Come on. Clear past experience in medicine. Wit, I would like them to remember that I'm positive, honest, and eager to learn. Ria, I'm hardworking and dedicated. Jennifer, responsible, research-oriented, self-driven, kind. Lauren, my time in college marching band and how that has greatly provided growth for me. Jennifer, competent and capable. Tice, good with people. Abby, my leadership style, my passion for child development, positive. Carolyn, persistence and dedication to the medical field. Nancy, I'm interested in delivery of health services to individuals who do not have access to medicine. Joseph, I want to express my tenacity to be a change agent in the lives of patients that I will treat.
Okay, I want to just quickly address a couple of these if I could. Some of these are excellent. I love the word tenacity. I think that's a very strong word. Resilience is great. Hardworking is great. But a lot of people are going to say that. Hardworking, dedicated, pretty much applies to everybody applying to medical school. I want to look at Laura, and you said my time in college marching band and how that's greatly provided growth for me. We're going to talk about this a little bit in the next part, but you're using an experience rather than a quality. Instead of, I want this experience in marching band to be able to support whatever quality you possess. So we'll talk about making that shift a little bit farther down. But in all of these, you want to really bring out the things that, the qualities, the things that drive you, the things that get you up in the morning. What are the big things that will make you, that you will bring and that you'll be able to contribute to the medical school class? And that is who you are. Now, when we go on down, let me close this here. Linda did something, oh, there we go, sorry. Okay, so in thinking about those things, what is it that makes you special? How will you answer that gem of, imagine there's 50 other applicants here in this room, why should we accept you? This is what your personal statement and your secondary essays have already begun to answer. And if you've done a good job of those, and you did if you've gotten an interview invite, then you'll be able to pull out those elements to expand. Go through these carefully and pull out 3, maybe 4 qualities or characteristics that you want to present to the admissions officers. In your answers, you'll keep coming back to these main ideas, reiterating them, reaffirming them, and instilling them in the mind of the interview. The examples are the things that will support these qualities. So what I'd like you to do is take whatever qualities you want to talk about, your tenacity, your dedication, your creativity, and yes, even your work ethic, and think of the personal experiences that demonstrate each quality you listed. If these truly are your qualities, then this exercise should not be difficult at all. You should have several times when you've demonstrated each one. Some stories will illustrate multiple qualities, which is even better. To put it another way, I'm asking you to think about your own qualities and characteristics rather than answers to specific questions that you're asked. It's a shift in thinking that's going to give you a lot more flexibility during the interview, and I'll show you how that works. Here's how one of my clients explained her research in our first interview with each other. It's a pretty, I'll just read it. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for 3 years. My main role is inputting and interpreting data. I'm involved in group discussions. I've authored a review. I'm also working on another review, and I'm interested in collecting data. It's a pretty basic description of just about every research project, and it's not inaccurate, but it's not going to thrill anybody. However, from these lines, she can pull out elements of maturity, critical thinking, and collaboration, which are some of the strengths that she wants to convey to the interviewer. But instead of making the interviewer do that work and pull them out themselves, she'll bring it into focus. This time she says, I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. What's interesting is that while inputting and interpreting data, my critical thinking skills have gotten stronger. Now I'm understanding subtleties in data and detecting patterns I want to explain. Our lab's very collaborative, and I always look forward to contributing to our weekly discussions. This description can't help but sound more engaging. She's telling the same story, but this time she's pulling out elements she enjoys and that she's good at. There's some excitement here. There's that emphasis on what's interesting and what she looks forward to. And she's talking about the things she's identified as her strengths, her critical thinking skills, and her collaborative skills. So this is a good answer, but how's she going to remember this perfectly phrased answer? Like I said, I don't want her to write it down, but instead, I want her to remember a few key points that she can easily revise on the fly. So here's a quick outline. She knows that when she's asked about research, she wants to demonstrate that she's been there for 3 years. She knows that she wants to demonstrate her critical thinking skills and highlight the teamwork and their contributions. But what if she doesn't get asked about research? What if instead someone asks about an example of how she works well with others? In that case, this story is easily modified. She says something like, I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. Our lab is very collaborative. At our weekly group discussions, everybody has a chance to share their projects and help with each other's problems. Inputting and interpreting data can be solitary work, but input from the other lab members is really sharpening my critical thinking skills as I'm trying to identify the patterns to look for. So do you see the difference here? She's switching from using her research experience as the focus to using it as evidence to support her qualities, her critical thinking, collaborative skills. The best stories are going to multitask for you. If you can get very comfortable telling them and know which qualities or traits they illustrate, you'll be able to address unexpected questions with no trouble on the fly. Now let's talk a little about strengths and weaknesses. Med schools love asking applicants to identify these. If you've already figured out what qualities are present in your stories, then you're well on your way. Let's take our applicant above. She's prepared stories about her research, her community service, and her work on a medical mission. So far, she's been asked about her mission and community service. So this is an opportunity to bring up her research, which, as she's already decided, illustrates her critical thinking and teamwork skills. She chooses one of these as her strengths, pops in her example from the lab, and away she goes. Your greatest weakness is a bit trickier, but again, it's about framing your answer. Nobody is perfect, and med schools want students who are self-aware enough to know what needs work. They also want to know that your weakness isn't debilitating or that it's going to limit your study of medicine. They want to know that you're working on it. So there's no point in saying you're a perfectionist, but you might be overly detail-oriented. That's not necessarily a bad thing in some medical fields. Or you might have a tendency to bite off more than you can chew and feel like you're letting people down. This is a common problem for med students. Or on the other extreme, you might be shy or have trouble taking risks. Any of these weaknesses might be severely debilitating, or they might be no big deal. But I think it's human nature to imagine the worst. So your job is to rein in their imaginations, or as I like to say, box it up. Explain how your shyness kept you from joining clubs back in high school, or share a time when you had trouble balancing all of your responsibilities. This will set boundaries for your weakness, hopefully ones that aren't insurmountable. Sharing what you've then done to overcome this can be important. Whether you've explored better time management or joined a local Toastmasters club, show the interviewer that you don't just know about your weaknesses, but that you're taking steps to conquer it. But what about those weak spots on your application? Do you have a failed class or even a bad year, a big gap to explain? It might sound cliched, but honesty is really the best policy here. You want to frame your answers in a way that shows that you accept responsibility for what's happened and that you learn from the experience. Let's say that you got in over your head one semester and your GPA suffered, or that there were family issues and you had to withdraw. That happens. Be upfront and explain it. But just like with the research example above, you want to show what positive qualities you took out of this experience, how you got back on track, how you developed new tools to deal with any problems that you might have faced. Again, preparing these answers ahead of time is going to go a long way to addressing them in the interview. As well as knowing your stories, you need to show that you know a great deal about the school where you're interviewing and that you'll be a valuable addition to their class. You probably answered a question like, why do you want to go here on your secondary? Be sure to review these carefully so you can expand and not contradict them. You also want to emphasize your fit in all of your answers. Don't wait until you're asked why you want to go to a particular program. Instead, if you're clear about their mission, you can weave that into your answers. You might do this, for instance, by linking your research interests to the programs. Mount Sinai School of Medicine, for instance, says, Mount Sinai will be a participant in efforts to define and solve health problems in population groups and communities through its capability in developing scientific knowledge, education, and service. So when our model applicant is asked about her research with targeted insulin receptors in the Johnson lab, she links it to this idea and says, I'm glad you asked me about that because the East Harlem Health Outreach Partnership on Diabetes is one of the main reasons I'm drawn to Mount Sinai. My research focused on And then she goes into the explanation of her research. She comes back to close it with something like, I've learned a lot about diabetes in the lab, and I'd really like to see how it's treated in the community here. So she's doing a great job at pulling in the main parts of the mission statement into and integrating it in her own experience. So where do you get these details? Obviously, the first stop should be the School of Medicine website, which you probably already visited for your secondary essays. This is a great place to get, as much information of their curriculum and student activities, which you can highlight. Another really useful place for this kind of information is the news section. This is where you'll find out what they're excited about. Is there a new obstetrics wing or simulation lab that they're especially proud of? Did a research program in your area just get funding? Have they created a new scholarship for med student missions? These are the kind of things that admissions people love to talk about, and the kinds of things that you should know before you start your interview. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Googling news from outside sources can give you information that might not be updated on their websites. You might come across an article about how a third-year med student at Mercer cultivates a garden because Macon, Georgia is a food desert. Or if you're interviewing at Mercer and have an interest in community nutrition, this is a great connection to make. Finally, you want to network with everyone that you know. By now, you should already know where all of your personal physicians, research associates, professors went to school. If somebody went to the school where you're interviewing, talk to them. Find out what you can about the facilities and the culture and even popular lunch spots. Use every resource that you can to show that you know about the program and know why you want to go there. Finally, let's talk about that fun question, tell me about yourself. This is often one of the very first questions you'll encounter in an interview, and it's where you'll establish the ideas you want to present. Time and again, I hear people start with, my name is. They already know this, and you don't need to follow that with, I was born in. This can work, but you can tackle the whole question in non-chronological order by finding a common theme that pulls together varied elements of your experiences, and that's going to be even more engaging. What I generally do with my clients is to have them tackle this question by just throwing out any ideas they might want to include. Talking about their family background or cultural upbringing, talking about their science and research interests, talking about community activities, talking about clinical activities, talking about hobbies. After this, for lack of a better word, brain dump, we'll repackage it. We'll tease through the different threads and find out what they have in common. For instance, you might want to set up your answer around a person or an idea that inspires you, like this research-oriented applicant did. She starts with her mother's immigration from China, framing her life dedicated to teaching and learning in the terms of her mom's determination to be educated. This gives her a chance to talk briefly about her research, about discovery through her hobbies, and her community service that's dedicated to teaching. Then she closes it with a killer ending line. My mom was determined to discover a better world. I'm continuing that quest with a career in medicine. Now, I said earlier not to memorize anything, but the exception is the first and last lines of this particular answer. If you can give your story a great set of bookends, you'll definitely stand out. Let's look at another tell me about yourself. An older non-traditional student might ramble through the twists and turns of his career, which could easily run the risk of boring his listeners. Or he might start out with a startling statement like, my high school biology teacher said I'd never amount to anything. And then as he goes through some of the details about how he got to where he currently is, he emphasizes that how he got here is an interesting story. Again, it's an interesting story, those details that are yours alone that make the difference and make them remember you. It's always good to embed your qualities in details of your life. Often it's these atypical background details that catch the interviewer's attention. There's a good chance they'll ask this applicant about painting houses, or they'll ask someone about their baseball career, or some specific creative endeavor that they've been involved in. These help you stand out, and they're the things that people want to know to differentiate you. All the answers I've given you tonight have been real answers from my clients, with details changed, of course, that we've developed from what's basically starts as a mass of unconnected ideas. The key is to get these ideas out before you try to make sense of them. Writing them, recording them, and sorting through them with a friend or an admissions consultant can help you put them in some order and present them in a strong way, since it's often very hard to be objective about your own experiences. Finally, just a couple of random bits here. I'm often asked if your answer to "tell me about yourself" needs to explain an applicant's motivation for medicine. While I think the stories you share should naturally lead to that, this is really a different question. While you'll probably have aspects pointing to your interests there, your experiences with research or clinical work or whatever you've been involved in, you need to do more to truly tell them who you are. Nonetheless, you should address the "why I want to be a doctor" question in the exact same way. Identify the string of events that led to your decision. Not every twist and turn needs to be included. They'll have your primary and secondary answers, after all, to explain a lot of this. But knowing where your motivation comes from and how it shaped your future needs to come across. How long should these answers be? Well, "tell me about yourself" is going to be your longest answer, usually around 3 minutes. Longer than that, and you run the risk of losing the listener's attention. But what if you have more to say? It's usually not too hard to tell when the listener is losing interest. They might start fidgeting with papers or doodling or not making eye contact. If someone does this as you're going into some detail, say about research, thesis, or some details of some activity you've been involved in, you can save yourself by just saying, "I could go on about this all day, but I know you've got other questions, so just let me know if I can answer anything else about this." If they're interested, they will. If not, you've opened a door to a subject that interests them more. So, in short, the idea behind all of this is to make sure that you know your answers and that you haven't just memorized them. Trying to memorize a script is a recipe for disaster. It sets you up for failure if a question is not asked in the exact same way or you forget a line or two. Instead, focus on learning the stories that you can adapt for various purposes, knowing what stories support which qualities you have, and that you're comfortable telling them in various ways. Now, practice. Remember that you want your interview to feel conversational, engaging, and unrehearsed. That's a tall order when you're feeling nervous and maybe even a little desperate. Practice is the only thing that's going to help you feel comfortable and even natural. There are many ways you can practice, both by yourself and with others. The first thing I recommend is to talk to yourself. Do this when you're in the shower, when you're washing dishes, anytime that you're alone. I really like this method because I think it helps you get comfortable talking about yourself without setting aside a designated time to practice. You don't even have to answer any specific question. Just talk about your research as you would tell to a friend, or talk about one thing that you really wish you could improve upon. You also want to record yourself. Don't do this every time you practice. That gets away from that informal storytelling that I want you to develop. But at least once at the start of your practice, and then evaluate yourself about halfway through, just record yourself, see if you speak at a monotone, if you're overusing fillers like or actually, and if you're looking at the camera. You'll also be able to detect any nonverbal cues. So check to make sure that you're not drawing back defensively or that you have anything annoying with your hand, that your hair is out of your way. Just make sure that you know what you're looking like. If you record or film yourself at the early stages of your practice, I guarantee you'll find problem areas while you still have time to work on them. And again, I'm pushing YouTube. It's chock full of videos from speech coaches addressing every issue imaginable so you can sound clear and confident. Another thing that I recommend doing is debate yourself. A lot of programs will ask ethical or philosophical questions. With most of these, there's no right or wrong answer. Interviewers just want to know that you're able to think about challenging topics, but you can prepare yourself. Arguing both sides of a question is a really good way to do this. You can also prepare by reading current issues of JAMA, and the University of Washington, I've linked that, the Ethics in Medicine site, is a bioethics discussion page about patient issues that I encourage everybody to look at. It's one thing to read the articles and another to present them coherently, and that's where arguing both sides of a popular debate, abortion or Medicaid or whatever it might be, you can present different viewpoints and ensures that you will really understand them and that you can make a coherent argument for or against an issue. Finally, practice with other people. Give your parents or roommates or best friends a list of questions and have them fire them at you. Be sure to ask for honest feedback or you won't get it. Or schedule a mock interview with a consultant. We're paid to give you honest feedback, and we can be a useful tool to help you identify and address difficult questions or problem areas. I go over my clients' specific questions and we tackle ethical issues. And we also really work on being flexible with your stories so that you'll be able to handle anything that's thrown at you. You can start practicing anytime. In fact, the earlier the better. The more aware you are of your quirks, the more likely you'll have time to address them. And the more accustomed you are to sharing your stories, the more comfortable you will be. That's it. I know there's a lot writing on your interviews, and I hope that what we've talked about, that we've raced through, will help you nail them. If you have questions, please stick around and let me know. And good luck to you all.
Okay, great. I have a little bit I'd like to share with you. And I think my screen is now live, yeah. So first I want to start by thanking Cyd very, very much for this highly informative webinar. I'm sure everyone here now has the tools to nail that interview. And at this point, I'd actually like to ask you to post in the chat window what you found most valuable. What was the most valuable concept, piece of advice, or information that you learned so far from Cyd's presentation? And that would be in the chat window. What was the most valuable concept, piece of advice, or information you learned from Cyd's presentation? Okay, here it comes. Surrounding your discussion around your qualities and backing up with experiences. Yeah, great, that was a really good tip. How to switch out of rambling about a topic, okay. Doing a test run with friends and getting feedback. Practicing and how to highlight qualities through experience instead of just explaining the experience. Good, Lauren. Learning how to effectively relate my qualities to my experiences. I think they got it, Cyd. Why practice tackling the tell me about yourself question, link examples of stories to your qualities, how to answer tell me about yourself, start talking to yourself, pairing stories with qualities you want to highlight and the qualities with stories to support them. Great. I found the edited student examples really helpful. Thank you, Christy. On how to, okay, more on how to tell you. Cyd, they liked it. Being flexible with our story. Yeah. When you talk about yourself in an interesting yet concise way. That's from Neely. So now we're going to take questions in just a minute, and I invite you to post your questions in the question window. But I'd like to share a couple of thoughts I have about the medical school interview. If you're lucky enough to get called to interview, first of all, celebrate. You've made enough of an impression with your primary and secondary applications for the admissions committee members to want to invest more of their very valuable time in getting to know you and seeing if you are a fit for their community. That invitation represents opportunity and statistically a vastly improved chance of acceptance. But it also presents risks. Are you going to present yourself in your interview as a future professional? Remember that first part that Cyd was talking about in terms of attire and environment? Are you going to come across as someone who would be a thoughtful member of the community and later a compassionate physician, whom the interviewer could see treating his or her loved one? Because that's really what's in the back of their mind. Are you going to successfully implement all the excellent advice that Cyd provided today? That's your challenge. And it's a challenge Cyd and her colleagues here at Accepted would like to help you meet with flying colors. I'd like to tell you about a call I had not too long ago. An applicant called inquiring about our med school mock interview package. And I gave her the details at the end. And at the end of the call, she said, I have one more question. Why do I need this service? Can't I just interview on my own? Can't I just research the schools, think about likely questions, view some YouTube videos, which Cyd has been recommending, and I would recommend too, and give my best answers? So I asked the caller, have you ever performed either music, theater, or the arts? Have you ever been an athlete? Sure, she said, I play the piano. And then I asked, would you consider performing without rehearsing? Would you want to get on stage after just thoroughly reviewing the musical score and thinking about it? Even practicing without a dress rehearsal? Our mock interview is like a rehearsal. And like all rehearsals, it allows you to improve and polish your performance before the big day. Now let's look at some sample feedback from people who've had their dress rehearsals with Accepted. I don't think I would be at the same place today without your help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11. Actually, I think this is the second one. This was Sid's client. I went to 11, accepted to 5, and waitlisted to 4. Or, Cydney, thank you so much for your help so far. I've been really successful. I have been invited to 70 interviews, accepted to 4 schools, and awarded a full scholarship at another one. Or the last one, for another consultant, I had the pleasure of working with Alicia to prepare for my medical school interview. Through our many practice sessions, I felt confident and prepared for the day of the interview and was fortunate to receive an acceptance to the medical school of my dreams. Now, these applicants are pursuing their medical school dreams. I'd like to urge you to follow the path that they took so that you too can pursue your medical school dreams. Visit accepted.com/mediv once you have a medical school invitation. Choose a service that's right for you because there are some options. Get the guidance that you need, have that dress rehearsal, and apply confidently or interview confidently and successfully. And now for your questions. And again, you're welcome to pose them in the question window. Sid, you're still here, right?
Yes, and I can see the questions.
Great. All right. So one question is, should we use virtual backgrounds? And actually, you know what? We were going to also, I think, go on video so you can see us. We can have a little bit
I'm trying
more.
to start my video. It tells me you stopped it.
I stopped it?
It says the host stopped it.
I did not.
Okay. Well, let's just talk about virtual backgrounds.
Okay.
Virtual backgrounds are horrible. They look great if you are in one position and you don't move, but unless you have a green screen, they can be really problematic in like cutting out parts of your hair or your shoulder, just anything that's not in the exact facial area that's behind in the virtual background will show up as, well, it won't show up at all. So avoid those. I wish you could see the one I have here. It's just basically a white screen, and it's very simple and very clean, and it's not going to distract anyone. Anything with books or clutter is, even if it looks nice and neat, it's, interesting books, your eyes are going to go to the books and see what's there. So, just try to keep it very simple. Katya asked, can I use a background with white closets? Absolutely. That's a really good idea. Make sure your lighting is good. White can be tricky, especially if it's like something that's shiny. So make sure that your light is good, so it's not just reflecting kind of around you. You asked.
By the way, just one other thing on the screen question, if I could, Sid.
Yeah.
I recently got a green screen, and I have a nice background, nice logo, the whole thing. And my staff said, Linda, it really looks a lot better when it's just your office. It's much more authentic. Mm-hmm. So, and you don't have that blurring around the edges, which you still have a little bit of, even if you do invest in a green screen.
Yeah.
So I think Sid's idea of having just a nice clean background, straightening up the room behind you, whatever it is, or having white closets behind you, a white wall, is a good idea. I wouldn't wear white if you have white closets behind you or a white screen. I'd wear something, dark solid.
I wouldn't recommend wearing white to an interview in any case.
Right. That's true too. So, just bear that in mind. Okay.
The other part of Katya's question was about the chair.
Yes.
So if you don't have a kitchen chair is good. If it may be lower than your desk chair, so sit on a pillow or lower your camera a little bit so that your eye level and the camera are the same. But yeah, the problem with the swivel chair is that if you get nervous, you're going to swivel, and that just looks distracting. So avoid that.
Okay. Here we have one from Sudha. Will interviewers ask about Casper performance? I've never heard of that. Have you, Sid?
Will they ask about Casper? They potentially could.
They could, but they have the Casper results, so I'm not sure that there's a lot of sense in them asking.
Probably not. But I mean, anything pretty much is fair game. So,
Sure.
you know, the problem with Casper is that if you don't know how you did on it, so they're going to be revealing that you did well or not. That could be an issue ethically. So I doubt they would ask
Right.
that.
Okay.
Joseph Parrish. Now that's a
Joe
question we
asks,
can't really answer in this because this is
getting in Joe's question, let's
the
see.
scope.
Yeah, it's a different scope, but I'm going to touch on it. Getting an interview is not that easy or guaranteed. It definitely is not. How can you help us simply get an interview? Well, we can't guarantee that you get an interview, but we can help you by helping you present yourself effectively via your primary application and your secondary application in terms of the essays, the most meaningful experiences, the activity descriptions, and of course the secondary essays. Now, that's not the entire application. There still is a transcript, and there's an MCAT, and there's the various experiences that you're going to be writing out and bringing to the table. But those are the way that we help you is through how you present yourself via the application. Okay, let's see. Carolyn asked, this is my 4th cycle applying, career changer, bad undergrad GPA. Last year, I got my first one and only interview, got waitlisted. This round, I applied early decision to that one school. Any special tips for when you've previously interviewed with a school? Anything I should know when interviewing under the early decision program?
Yeah. So Carolyn, the biggest thing is that they're going to want to see an improvement from last year. They want to know that you have that you know more about the school. What steps have you taken to learn about it? Have you talked to anyone there? Anything that you can show a better fit than you did before. In terms of early decision, it's really important that you make the case for why this is the one and only medical school for you. It can be, there could be regional issues, or it can be something specific about their curriculum and the way that they prepare you to do what you want to do in the future. Whatever it is, it just really needs to be specific. And I mean, this is true in all interviews, so I shouldn't say it's just for early decision interviews. But in terms of reapplications, you've got to show that you're a better candidate and a better fit for the school than you were before. Also, take some time to assess and figure out why you didn't get accepted last time. It's good to know that so that if there are problem areas, you can show how you've addressed them.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for the question. We have an anonymous attendee who asks, what should you say if you get a question you don't know how to answer? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's likely to happen. It could be a sort of a factual question, and those are tricky. You don't want to, you might just have to say, I'm sorry, I don't know about that issue. If you can compare it to something that you do know about, that's one tactic you can take, but don't try to bluff. Don't act like you know an answer if you really don't.
Yeah.
If it is something that's based more on your experiences, well, hopefully what we've talked about tonight will keep that from happening, because if you can, if you know what experiences are going to be supporting which traits or characteristics that you have, you should be able to find some way to answer it. I'm sorry, it's a really vague answer, but what the biggest thing is that don't make things up, because you'll just look silly. And that's also not something that you want to do as a medical student or physician. That's, making something up to try to save face is not the way to go.
You could ask for clarification also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on. So Elizabeth asks, is it a good idea to bring up people you know who went to the school where you were interviewing?
Normally, yes. Name dropping is good. I recommend you do that in your secondaries as well. The thing is that it needs to be someone that was successful at the school. So if it's someone that's really struggling, that doesn't have positive things to say about the school, then you might not want to. But in most cases, yes, if you're showing that you know people there, that they've been, you are familiar with the program through a specific person, or even someone who went there years ago. This is how I first found out about the school, and they loved their experience here, and that made me investigate it more. So yes, definitely bring in those kind of things.
Okay, great. Sam writes, I'm a transfer student. I was consistently an A student in community college and consistently a B student at university. If I'm asked about this discrepancy, how should I respond? How do I go about it?
Well, that's going to be an issue. They're going to look at that and see that and think that there's an issue in your study patterns. Hopefully there'll be a trend where you started out as a B student and were able to work up to A's. But if you're just consistently a B student, it really depend on it would, but it would really depend on what the causes are, and how you address them. If you were just, did you change your study methods? Did you start going to office hours a lot more? How did you react when you couldn't get it up, when you couldn't get your grades up? What did you do to improve? And like Linda says, one of the big ways to improve would be to improve your grades with a post-bac or a special master's program.
Okay. Nile asks, how do you handle a 2-on-1 interview?
Do you mean where there's two different people on Zoom?
Yeah, two like a panel, basically.
Exactly the same. You do not, like I said before, you don't want your eyes to drift all over your screen. So even though their faces are there, and you kind of want to be aware of them in case they're looking bored, what your focus needs to be on is your camera. So they're going to see that. They're not going to see that you're looking at them. They're going to see your face in full view. So this is hard to do. We want our eyes to go to whoever is talking, but just you can practice, do Google Hangouts with friends and record it and see how you are responding to different people on the screen. Just make sure that you are trying to keep your focus on the one on the camera eye.
Okay. So thanks for the good question. Daniel asks, what are good questions? And there's somebody else also, Nicole also asked a very similar question. Yeah. What are good questions to ask the interviewer after the interview is over before logging off?
So I mentioned earlier that you can find out information about the school by looking at the news section of the school, as well as the community or like the local newspaper and how they've written about the school. These are great sources to find stories and to find questions about things that may not be covered in a more general orientation. Like I said, there's some schools will have like community gardens, or they'll have like an art show or different things that you might have a real affinity for. In your questions, try not to just ask questions in general, but show, like for instance, I have been an artist my whole life, and I love painting and all this, and I saw in your that every year the medical school hosts a gallery exhibit. I thought this was great. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Link your interests, your traits, the things that you want to get out of medical school with what they offer. So basically, in those ways, you're asking questions that you already know the answer to get them to talk. And somebody had asked about asking how to make a conversation, how to make the interview more conversation. And this will help do that as well. Just get them talking. Things that they're especially proud of. Like I said, a new wing of the hospital, or some great research project or great funding that's just come through. Those are the kind of things that they love to talk about at length. And if you can get them talking, they're going to have a favorable impression of you.
Okay, great answer. Thank you, Sid. We also have a couple of questions about PA school interviews. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, but the question is, do you help with PA school interviews as well? The answer is yes, and it's the same service options. You have interviews coming up for PA school and you'd like to prepare for it. We'd be more than happy to help you out. Okay, let's see this. Jennifer asked, what if the person that you're name dropping is a relative? I'm
Yeah.
assuming that they know that my brother is an attending physician at their school.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I don't think I'm a little concerned just about using the phrase name dropping. I mean, there should be some substance associated with the name. In other words, you learned something from this person that, that increased the attraction of the school to you, or you got some insight into the values of the school or something like that. Right. Okay. So that's just one thing I wanted to clarify. Let's see. Anonymous attendee asks, will interviewers ever ask questions that test our medical knowledge, or will they be strictly questions that see if we are a fit candidate? If they do, will answering them wrongly greatly impact my chances of being accepted?
So they're less likely to ask you a medical knowledge question and more a question about how you dealt with someone in a patient care setting. Like it may be a hypothetical. If you are imagine you're a third-year medical student and you're dealing with a patient who's just been diagnosed with cancer. What do they need to know? The question is not asking you the medical diagnosis. They're not asking you how, the specifics of this person's prognosis or what is, anything like that. What they want to know is that you have compassion for the patient. So those kind of questions, if you lead with being very patient-centered, have a lot of compassion and empathy for the people that you're treating, then you really can't go wrong. In a question like that, the thing that someone needs to know more than anything else is how that you're going to fight for them and that you're going to be there. You and the medical team is going to be there the entire time doing everything you can for them. So they may ask a question similar to, describe a clinical experience that you've had. Say you're a scribe or working in as an EMT or somewhere where you have that kind of patient contact. They may ask you details about the way that something was handled. Just answer honestly. They're not, hopefully it's going to not, I don't think they're going to ask you anything where you would get in trouble because you diagnosed someone the wrong way, because you're not supposed to know that yet. What they want to see is that you have the qualities to learn how to do that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to teach you.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. From anonymous attendee, I have a 3.98 GPA, but I got a 5.11 on the MCAT second attempt. Do you think that will be an issue? Do you think they're really going to, by the time you get to the interview stage, are they really going to be quizzing people about discrepancies between GPA and MCAT and things like that?
Not so much. By the time you get to the interview stage, they like everything that they've seen. Otherwise, they're not going to be interviewing you.
Right. Right.
Can I answer that question about talking fast? Because I do that too.
Okay, go for it.
This is my issue as well.
Wait, let me just give a question. The question is, I have a tendency to talk fast, which can lead to rambling, stammering. How can I limit this effectively? I'm sorry.
I'm a very bad person to give advice on this because this is what I do. Years of debate. But the thing is, you want to be able to convey your message thoughtfully and to show that you are going to be able to communicate well with other people. If you're speeding through everything, you're not doing that as well as you could. So practicing and forcing yourself to slow down like I'm doing now and taking some time to figure out what your next words are going to be, I think that's the best way to do it. It takes practice and it's very, very hard to get over habits of speaking fast, especially when you're nervous. But, just do what you can and put as much practice into it as possible.
Yeah, and I think you just have to force yourself, and I'm kidding aside now, force yourself to slow down, enunciate, and make sure that you're speaking clearly. Another anonymous attendee, I get nervous. It might sometimes sound awkward when I present myself when I'm not an awkward person at all. I get mad at myself for doing that. Is there anything that you would suggest in fixing this? I've noticed my awkwardness when I record myself too. It feels really unnatural.
Oh, you're being so hard on yourself. That is something that everybody feels awkward. The first time you hear yourself on a recording, you're just like, oh my gosh, I sound like that all the time. Don't put yourself down for that. It's something that is natural. Um, the one thing that I will say is that if you are familiar with talking about yourself, like I said, that talking to yourself, you are going to get a lot better at just at being more conversational. Um, you know, talk about some of the main things that happened in your day. It doesn't even need to be about the interview itself. It doesn't need to be about your medical experiences. It can be the ways that you got through the week, or just talk to yourself and get more comfortable with the way that you sound.
I, I think,
Yeah.
again, this is one of those times when the mock interviews can really, really be helpful. You'll get feedback, you'll get suggestions, and you'll get more
Mhm.
comfortable with talking in an interview situation. So that would definitely be one of my
Yeah.
recommendations. I go back to the dress rehearsal metaphor. That's what people who want to really perform do. They practice.
Right.
And, I'm sure you had practice exams before your MCAT also. So, okay. But I think I certainly agree with Sid that don't be so hard on yourself. Okay. Abby asked, Cydney mentioned uploading a thank you note, but I've also heard of people emailing thank you notes. Is it appropriate to ask in the interview for the interviewer's contact information?
Yeah, so normally this is something that you do in an in-person interview. You would ask the staff person when they're checking you in. So you're not going to be able to do that as easily with a virtual interview. What I recommend doing is when you get your interview invitation, you can ask for contact information at that point. Ask who will be interviewing them, and then just say, I'd like to send them a thank you note. Can I get the contact information? So you can get that in advance. I wouldn't use time in the actual interview for it. Those are going to be very short. You have a short amount of time with the interviewer, so don't ask them to do that.
Okay. Kamal asks, English is my second language. How much will my accent or any error in my speech affect the interview?
It's hard to say without knowing exactly what you sound like.
Right, right.
But
I think also it's not so much a matter of an accent as grammatical English and fluency.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the only thing I would say is just keep practicing. Try to smooth um, your accent. Try to speak as correctly as you can, and get your ideas across. Practice them as much as you can. And I really feel for you, because that's got to be really hard to be interviewing in another language that's not your own. That you're not your first language. And I wish I could say it didn't matter. But in truth, I mean, the way that if they can't understand you, it's going to be difficult for them to look favorably.
Right. I definitely will. Okay. Nile asks, if you get waitlisted, does that mean your interview didn't go well?
Not necessarily.
It means it could have gone great.
Yeah, it could just mean that they have a lot of people in a similar profile as you. It may mean that their class is almost full and they really want you, so they don't want to reject you, but they're keeping you. Waitlist doesn't mean that waitlisting is not bad. For a lot of schools, a lot of people on waitlist get in.
Right.
Yeah, so no, it doesn't necessarily mean your interview went badly.
Okay. And here's one from an anonymous attendee. I have a 3.98 GPA, a first-time MCAT of 518, and sent in the majority of my largely pre-written secondaries in 2 weeks or less. How likely am I to receive at least one secondary invitation? I think interview invitation means.
Mm-hmm.
And how long do you think it would be for them to be offered to me after my secondary submissions? It's hard to say.
It's impossible to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know about your experiences. If they
Yeah,
were,
the experiences count. Also, the schools that you are applying to matter.
yeah.
When they're sending out their invitations matters. Some are waiting to send them out later this cycle
A lot
because
of
of
them are
COVID.
waiting.
Yeah. So it's really hard to say. I know the waiting is also difficult. So hang in there. Don't give up. I do
Yeah.
believe you are going to get at least one secondary, unless you really, really blew your essays. But, you know, hang in there. Okay. All right. Anonymous attendee asked during interview, is it appropriate to talk about imposter syndrome as a weakness?
That's a good question. I guess that it could be talked about as a weakness if you are able to put it in a box and talk about how you've improved it.
And how you've overcome it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. What makes them reject you after interviewing and being on a wait list for months? And how can we improve the chances of getting in if they said no follow-ups? Okay,
If they
that's a
say no
tough one.
follow-ups, that's really tough.
Yeah, that is tough.
Yeah.
Before
And
I
the
got
next
to the,
question about update letters, if update letters make a difference. If updates are allowed, I definitely recommend them. If they're not, you're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
And there's not really anything you can do but be patient.
Yeah, no, that is tough. Some schools really welcome update letters. Some schools really don't want them. So you just have to know what the school wants. It is very, very difficult. If you're in the latter group, it was my first choice, but oh, that is tough. It was your first choice, but they rejected you. Are you going to reapply? Okay, good. Well, I hope you have better luck this time around. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do update letters make any difference if you're on the wait list? It depends on the school. Would you agree with that, Sid?
Yes, if they are allowed, then I think they definitely make a difference. As long as they're substantive. A lot of people will just do waitlist letters because they want to say that they really want to get into school. That's not going to cut it. You have to show them that you are continuing to improve your application and your potential for medical school, and you have to show your fit. If you're not doing that and you're not showing them new things, then it's a waste of time for them, and they don't look on that favorably.
Okay. Thank you again, everybody, for your time, your attention, your questions, and your answers. You've been a fantastic audience. I also want to thank Cydney Foote again for her very informative and practical presentations and answers during the Q&A. Last thought before we leave. Remember the applicants who had their dress rehearsals when accepted medical school admissions expert? It's far better to go into the interview knowing you're prepared and ready than to be in the interview wishing you'd had that dress rehearsal beforehand. So do as these applicants did. They are now pursuing, well, the applicants I told you about before, the applicants that already got in, the applicants whose testimonials are read. They are now pursuing their dream profession. They got accepted and were accepted. You can do exactly as they did. And again, $100 off, gold mock interview package. The coupon code is ACE your interview, ACE your IV. You can get it at accepted.com/mediv. It's valid through August 25th. Now, I have one question for you folks, okay? You've listened to Cydney's presentation. You've listened to my pitch. You've been here through the whole Q&A, asking and listening to great questions and hopefully equally great answers. You're clearly interested in what we have to say. For those of you who are still not planning on having a mock interview with Cyd or another accepted consultant, why are you sitting on the fence about engaging with us for your mock interviews, for your interview preparations? And that can go in the question or the chat window. I'll be monitoring them both. You're very welcome, Sudha. Anybody want to answer that one? What's causing you to hesitate and sit on the fence? It comes down to cost. Okay. All right. Well, okay. You know, you are probably spending about if you're not applying through the fee assistance program through FAP, $150 per school that you're applying to. You are so close to getting in when you get an interview invitation. Your chances have gone up astronomically. There's the risk that the interview prep could make the difference between acceptance and rejection. And I think our one mock interview package, I don't even remember how much it is right now. Actually, let me get it for you folks. It's, I think, do you know what it said off the top of your head? I should know that.
I don't.
Let me look it up really fast. The gold mock interview package is more money. Let me do it right here. But the single mock interview package, that's the gold. The single is $580 for a new client and $410 for an existing client. That means that for the cost of 3 application fees, that's the same as a mock interview, but you're so much closer to acceptance when the time you get to the interview stage. Okay. Obviously you need it. Yes, Joseph said that he needs an interview request to get started. That makes a lot of sense. And Katya, we'd love to help you too. So I realize that, cost is a factor. Applying to medical school is expensive, but you already paid for your MCAT. You've paid hundreds, if not several $1,000s in application fees. If you are not accepted after an interview invitation, you have a year more of lower income, because presumably you make more money as a doctor, and you'll have to apply again. Maybe, just maybe, it really pays to do that mock interview. Now, the gold mock interview package, because Joseph asked about that, is 3 mock interviews for 1 school, and it allows you to really improve over the course of those 3 interviews. And obviously, it's much less expensive than 3 individual interviews. So again, you have 1 interview, you get feedback. You have the 2nd interview, you get feedback and you improve, and then you have the 3rd interview, which would be that dress rehearsal. Okay.
Can I just add for the gold mock interviews?
Sure, go ahead, Sid.
I normally, I know that it says there for 3 interviews for the same school. I'm much more flexible than that. So
don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
Because if someone has 2 different schools they're interviewing for, I'll definitely help them with both.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. You're not supposed to tell me. All right. William asks, should you do the interview package now or wait until you get your first interview invitation? I would wait until you get your first interview invitation. Definitely. There's no advantage to anybody for you to buy them before that.
I recommend doing the interview about a week, at least a week before the interview. Do the mock interview a week before, because that gives you time to get your confidence up and have enough time to practice what we've talked about. But it's not such a great period of time that you lose that momentum.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Let's see, responses to me? Okay, yeah, Joseph liked your answers. Yeah, we do recognize Melanie wrote costs, especially with income loss due to COVID.
Yeah.
We do understand that. And we can try and work with you, but it's not going to make it go down to 0, that's for sure. So, I sympathize with you. This is a tough time. How many mock interviews do these come with? Well, the gold interview package is 3, Tiffany. The single interview mock is 1 mock interview. The first one is $580 because we want to review your MCAS and the secondary application for the interviewing school. The second mock interview is less because we've already gone through your MCAS. We already know you somewhat. Okay. So any other factors causing you to hesitate about engaging with Sid or one of her colleagues for a mock interview you'd like to raise now? Okay. Can I use it months down the road? Ask us then, okay? Katya asked, can I use the coupon code months down the road?
For sure, ask.
Yeah, just ask us. I somehow suspect that it might be possible, okay? I can't make a promise about it, but just ask, okay? How's that, Katya? All right, works for you. Okay, wonderful. In that case, I think it's time to call it an evening for all of us. and just wish you all the best with your applications. I hope you get lots and lots of interview invitations and ultimately multiple acceptances. Take
Good
care.
luck to everybody.
Yeah, good luck. Take care, everybody. There's lots of thank yous coming in, Sid. There have been all along. So
Nice.
thanks again to Sid, and thanks to you all.